We're going to begin with a reading. I've asked him to read, but I sort of want to preface that a little bit by telling you how much I absolutely adore his work. Accidentally, a friend of mine in Toronto sent me the In-Between World of Vikram Lal, saying, "This is the best book I've ever read," she said. And I know that this person has exquisite taste. So I read it, and I couldn't believe it. It was extraordinary. And told everybody that I could, in hearing distance of me, that this is a book that they should read. And I still do. Until I read The Magic of Saida. And we have some big competition, not to mention The Assassin's Son, which I absolutely love. I just love all his work. It's just, you're in for an enormous treat this evening. So we begin with you. Okay.
Thank you for your generous comment. It's very nice to be here and really in New York. And I've never been to this place before, but
To New York?
New York many times. I used to hate it at first, and then used to love it. But that was a long time ago. This novel, The Magic of Saida, it's essentially a love story, but like all love stories, it depends on who's making the love and where, and it gives you a chance to explore different things. And in this case, I have set the novel in a very ancient town on the east coast of Africa, Swahili, a town which has a Swahili culture, very strong poetic tradition, and a lot of ghosts and a lot of magic. And I don't know what happens, how you begin a book, but I just thought I would set it there. And then I thought I would put a person of roughly my age, when you come to a time when you start asking yourself, what's it all been about? And in this case, it's a very successful doctor, he decides to go back to this town where he was born and grew up, partly, and to find out what happened to the girl who had been his companion as a child, and then he fell in love with her. So there's a story of the relationship that developed from friendship to passion to then I suppose abandonment, but not in the normal sense. It's also because of politics and circumstance and a little bit of cowardice. But anyway, he goes back, and that's the story. Now, part of the story, and in telling the story, obviously other stories emerge. And one of the stories that emerges is on the coast of Africa. In fact, there was a lot of what we call nowadays insurrection against colonialism. And there was in this part of East Africa, there is a very strong, as I said, a poetic tradition which tells the history of that part of the world. And part of the history that it tells is the story of this resistance to German colonialism in East Africa in the beginning of the 20th century. And the story that emerges is that of a poet of the old school who is writing a kind of what he thinks is the history of the world, which means his world, and how it emerged from the past to the present. And the story of him and his brother, and between them there's a kind of there's a story of a conflict between the idea of collaboration in order to survive, which most of us do, and also to bear witness. And on the other hand, to be the idealist and to perish. So one brother therefore perished, and the other survived with a lot of guilt to write about the past. So I'm going to tell the story of how the two brothers, after a while, there's a meeting between them, but this happens a long time ago. And it happened just after the war against the Germans had taken place, which is called the Maji War, or the War of the Waters. When the war had just about ended, early one afternoon, a young stranger in traditional Muslim garb confronted the teacher Omari, he's the poet, on the street and told him in a low voice that a certain relation of his was living in Pembeni, a small settlement a few miles up from Kilwa on the coast. It could be reached by donkey in approximately 3 hours. and he was requested to bring provisions with him when he visited. Omari noted that he understood. Early on Sunday morning, modestly loaded with provisions, Omari set off on a hired donkey called Fatuma to see his brother. The village called Pembeni was on a track that ran over rough terrain, some 200 yards inland, and consisted of a few houses, a defunct shop, and some fishing boats on the shores of a narrow creek. He had been seen approaching, and his heart leapt as he sighted a tall figure, standing at the point where the track forked, waiting for him. Omari got off his donkey and walked the remaining way to go and kiss Abdul Karim's hand. Abdul Karim is his older brother and also a poet. A better poet, in fact. "How are you, my younger brother?" Abdul Karim asked. "I am well, my older brother. Praise be to God." "And your work is going well?" asked Abdul Karim. "I see you are in the family trade of teaching." "It is going well, my brother," said Omari. "And yes, my brother. And you, are you keeping well?" "For which thanks are due only to the merciful one," replied Abdul Karim. They walked to a small shambling house, the crude wattle frame exposed where the outer mud wall had broken off. At the doorway, Omari unloaded his parcel, which a young woman came and took from him with a courtesy, and he tied up his donkey. Inside, at first, the brothers sat on a mat in an awkward silence. The room was dark, but for a few thin rays of golden sunlight shooting through the roof, forming a somewhat catching display where they crossed in midair. It made for the only ornamentation in the room. Omari leaned over and handed his brother the manuscripts he had left in his custody when he first went away. "These have been with me a long time," Omari said. "I have treasured them and learned from them." Abdul Karim looked at them with a smile. "I do not remember them," he replied. "They are all a young man's compositions, but I can see that you must have improved them." "I took the liberty," Omari told him, "using what you taught me of composition. You will see that I have copied them on better paper too." "I see that," nodded his brother. "We'll keep them until I call for them. And I have more for you, copied on extremely poor quality paper such as was available to me in my travels." Abdul Karim had married a woman from the interior, the one who had accepted the provisions from Omari at the door. Her name was Zainabu, and she could barely speak Swahili. There was a child, a girl. Zainabu brought the men kahawa, which was too strong. Then they had a meal of ugali, which was too dry and grainy, and fried fish. "My dear brother," Omari said as they sat eating this coarse meal, when some time had passed, "you should return to the comforts of Kilwa. You should teach there. The German commissioner, Bonner Road, takes an interest in our poetry and language, and he will appreciate you." Abdul Karim said only, "Hmm." Then a moment later he said in mild admonishment, "Omari, chatting while eating is a white man's habit." Thereafter they ate in silence. Afterwards, as they sat, it was Abdul Karim who spoke first, looking away from his brother. His knees were raised where his hands met, the long slender fingers intertwined, and his long back curved like a bow. He looked like a sculpture. "I have seen much in the forests," he said, "enough for a full lifetime. I have seen terrible things, my brother. I have seen men cut open and left for the hyena, and I have seen men in the hundreds fall to the bullets, just as when a swarm of locusts rushes in and raises a field in moments. I have seen hunger and grief. There were unbelievers who showed the utmost courage, took steel in their chests, and believers who betrayed them to the Germans' mercenaries. It was too much to take, but events led from one to the next. Our book tells us to resist oppression, but there comes a time to submit and leave the fighting to God. He sent us the plague as though we were the Pharaoh, when in reality it is we who are the slaves. But he knows best. It seems to me now, my younger brother, that the path you chose to walk in life was well considered and have its merits. There is no harm in learning new ways, even if they are of the oppressor. The Quran exhorts us to be curious. And so, my brother, forgive me for the harshness I showed you when you were only a boy. My brother, you shame me, Omari protested. It was your love truly that has inspired me. Still, said Abdul Karim, I must walk on the path that I took. There was no other way for me, and I must live in hiding now. I dared not show my face to the Germans or their soldiers. He paused, then added, it is God's miracle surely that two brothers so close to each other can also be so different. Omari had brought with him some Indian sweets, the round laddus the two would eat in Kilwa together. And as he unwrapped the package and placed it on the floor between them, the brothers exchanged a look and held back their emotions. Time and absence from each other had created this gulf, across which they could signal their feelings only in awkward gestures and formal speech. Omari told Abdul Karim about his own life, his wife who was called Halima, and his 3 children, and his work in the school under a woman called Frau Schwerin. He spoke of his schooling in Tanga, a town of great charm, with its promenade and large buildings. He described the white people he had seen in all their finery, relaxing outside a hotel. The women looked like angels. He described his stopover in Dar es Salaam, also beautiful, but bigger, with 2 big churches, bigger than any mosque he had seen. He had been shown where the governor Bwana Godson lived, but it was a forbidden area. They said Dar es Salaam was as big as Berlin. Yes, the Germans are a people of achievement, Abdul Karim admitted. He had not been to Tanga or Dar es Salaam, he said, but he had seen much of the country. It was vast, endless, people after people, tribe next to tribe, the number of languages spoken without number. But people in the villages everywhere were beginning to speak Swahili now. Soon the entire country would speak this one language, their language of the coast. And your former patron, Abdul Karim asked finally, what happened to him? Bwana Schmidt, Omari said, he died of fever. What does he know, Omari asked himself. How much does he suspect of my betrayal of Makunganya and Bwana Punja and the others to Bwana Schmidt? The German always paused to speak to me outside Punja's shop, and that day he gave me a heller. Abdul Karim knew that. Could that be why he left, so he couldn't have to confront me? Omari prepared to depart and took the fresh manuscript his brother gave him, along with the pages he himself had brought, wrapped in a newspaper. They walked outside. There, at the point of bidding farewell, he turned to Abdul Karim. Shamefaced, Omari made a request. My brother, he said, please sing a shairi in your voice, which I have not heard in a very long time. It is a voice I recall as beautiful as our father's. By reciting for me, you will be giving me 2 rewards. Abdul Karim said nothing for a while, apparently recollecting. Then he cleared his throat and sang a few verses, beginning in a very low voice until it became full and steady, and the notes became clear, strong and vibrant, as tears ran down Omari's cheeks. It was the last time Omari heard him recite. Zainabu and the child, her name was Aisha, had come to listen. Omari presented the child with 2 candies, which happened to come from England, each wrapped in shiny foil, and gave a 5 rupee note to Zainabu for the household. He kissed his brother's hand and then slowly rode home on the donkey.